Good evening. Tonight's top story: Lamar Jackson's weight is the talk of the town. We will discuss Lamar Jackson's comments on the situation and overall what to think about the quarterback reportedly losing 10 pounds from last season's playing weight and up to 25 pounds from his playing weight in 2022. Does it matter? Does it not? We will talk about that. We will update everyone on the T. Higgins situation. He is currently still holding out on OTA. So we will talk about what to do with T. Higgins in your fantasy leagues. What does his holdout currently mean, and what do we expect going forward? We will talk that and other OTA news all on Player Profiler today. Welcome in, everybody, to Player Profiler. Today, I am your Saturday host, Matt Babich, here to talk to you today about the latest in OTAs. We got a little bit of a rapid-fire episode today, as I am in between just so many things today on this Saturday. I hope you are enjoying your Memorial Day weekend. Hope it's maybe a little less busy than mine, a little bit more relaxing. But regardless, we are here today to talk about OTAs. And so we'll start with what's apparently the biggest story here in OTAs, and that's Lamar Jackson's weight. So the Ravens QB noted he is down to 205 pounds, which is roughly 10 pounds lighter than where he was playing last season, and that is 25 pounds lighter than what he was playing at in 2022. So the big question is, for me, why do we care so much? This is peak NFL news boredom. Lamar Jackson is a premier player in the NFL. And when most of the headlines today are circling players that aren't very interesting, right? We get Jalen Tolbert may have a bigger role in the Cowboys offense. Jamison Williams is ready for a huge career boost. We have a lot of talking points about some of the less interesting players in the NFL. Then we have stories like T. Higgins and Brandon Ayuk, who we've been doing this dance with for months on end. People are bored. So what catches the eyes of the American people? Lamar Jackson lost 10 more pounds in the offseason. So Lamar Jackson came off of a career high in passing yards, a career high in pass attempts, a career high in completion percentage, a career high in yards per attempt, the third highest rushing yard season on his tenure, and finishes the quarterback 3 in fantasy points per game, tied for his highest finish scoring-wise since 2021. So clearly losing the 15 pounds last year didn't hurt him. And so now we're concerned about losing an extra 10. Lamar Jackson told reporters, quote, "I'll say it was important enough to be able to move around a little bit extra. That's all. Just so I can be more agile and be able to move more," end quote. So from his perspective, Lamar Jackson is trying to get a little slimmer and get back to that 2020, 2019 rushing production that he was able to just electrify with 1,200 yards in 2019 and 1,000 yards in 2020. That's the type of Lamar Jackson he's trying to get back to. Do we want Lamar Jackson being like Josh Allen, adding on pounds, being a thicker guy and sacrificing his body run after run? No. You want elusiveness. You want pure speed. And you want him saving his body through smart slides and sideline exits. And so that's what Lamar is going after here. And this shouldn't be something we're talking about. If anything, it's something we should be excited about, because Lamar Jackson is looking back at his previous seasons and saying, I need to get back to where I was as an electric rusher. I need to get back to taking less hits, breaking off more runs, being more of a versatile asset instead of worrying about being the standard of a pocket passer and the toughness required to take hits. It's not important. Lamar's a tough dude. You know, being 25 pounds lighter isn't going to all of a sudden break every bone in his body. He's going to be smart. The Ravens are looking to protect him. They're looking to build the run game again to take that load off of Lamar Jackson. So this is a non-starter of an issue. In fact, this is something I'm excited about. I expect big things out of Lamar Jackson this year. Currently the QB3 on underdog drafts, and I think that's exactly where he should go. I love taking Lamar Jackson in fantasy this year. I think we're going to see closer to 1,000 rushing yards and potentially see another 3,500 passing yard season out of him. If Mark Andrews can stay healthy, keeping that weapon on the field, big things are coming from Lamar Jackson. So be very careful who you listen to at this time of the NFL news. If people are talking about this in a serious tone, you're worried about his weight, then it's just your signal to move on from that analyst or personality. We will talk more OTA news. In fact, we'll stay on the Baltimore Ravens and talk about Keaton Mitchell and continue NFL OTA news on Player Profiler today right after this.
This episode is made possible by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly, especially now. It's Best Ball Mania season, baby! Best Ball Mania 5! I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems. But they have the NBA pick'ems, baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off.
Go draft your ass off with Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code Underworld. We are back with Player Profiler today on Saturday, May 25th, kicking off Memorial Day weekend here. And we will continue on the Ravens in our OTA discussions, talking about Keaton Mitchell. So John Harbaugh went to reporters on Wednesday and said that Keaton Mitchell is on schedule with his ACL recovery. Mitchell went down with the ACL injury in week 15 and is definitely not expected to be back for training camp. They actually don't really expect, as most of us wouldn't, him to be back until a good chunk of the season is over. So getting that injury in week 15 is tough. The 10-month mark is obviously midway-ish through the season. So when you get hurt that late, you can't be a part of minicamp at all. You're behind a step. And stepping in mid-season is a lot different than stepping in week 1, week 2. You don't miss that much. If you're even to the point where you're going through walkthroughs and participating in team activities in some way during minicamp, OTAs, offseason, that's vital, especially when you're early on in your career. Keaton Mitchell going into his sophomore season. So Keaton Mitchell is going to miss some valuable time, which begs the question, who is going to be the RB2 behind Derrick Henry in Baltimore? Now, the interesting thing about Derrick Henry is coaches have already been on the record saying that they don't want to overwork him. But they have mentioned if he gets to 300 carries, he gets to 300 carries. So Derrick Henry is going to be a tank for this team as long as he can hold up. The Ravens are going to lean on him as often as they can, but when they cannot, the RB2 in Baltimore is always a fantasy relevant position. Even with Lamar Jackson, even if J.K. Dobbins were to be healthy all last year, being a bell cow running back, it doesn't just have to be Gus Edwards in the RB1 spot to make the RB2 valuable in Baltimore. It's inherently valuable with their offense. Right now, Justice Hill is slated as, or projected, I should say, to be the RB2 with 5th round pick out of Marshall, Rasheen Ali, just right behind him. And so Rasheen Ali turns into potentially one of the biggest values in both rookie and seasonal drafts this year if he's truly going to be the RB2. I mean, think about it from a high level perspective. Are we really going to push our chips in on Justice Hill again? I spent all my fab in some leagues on Justice Hill, taking that bet again, and I couldn't feel dumber. Even hindsight's always 2020, but even in the moment, I should have told myself this bet has lost over and over and over and over again. Now, Keaton Mitchell didn't necessarily win you leagues last year up through his injury, but he certainly performed well, better than Justice Hill, and was cheaper to acquire on waivers. So, I mean, just a big L and a loss I'm not willing to take again. Insanity, as Einstein said, is the definition is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's what this is. You're insane if you push your chips in on Justice Hill again. So that makes Rasheen Ali the bet, and why not Rasheen Ali? Rookie out of Marshall was one of the most electric backfield producers last year, in a 93rd percentile college dominator rating, an 81st percentile college target share, had a 46 reception season at Marshall at the age of 20 years old, where he also put up 1,400 rushing yards on 250 carries with 24 total touchdowns. I mean, this guy is a monster, and he goes into one of the most illustrious rushing offenses in football. It's a 73rd percentile speed score. He has the breakaway speed. He has the juice, that youthful juice that Baltimore looks for. I mean, hell, they just unleashed it with Keaton Mitchell last year. And they said, we're going to miss this guy for at least half the season. So what do? We'll throw a 5th-round pick at Rasheen Ali and hit the same uncut gem 2 years in a row. So Rasheen Ali is one of the biggest values right now in all of fantasy football. He's going to be relevant. If you're drafting in late July, August, I promise you, in deeper leagues, he's going to be someone who gets drafted. If you're in a keeper league, you're going to want to throw a pick on Rasheen Ali, because that's the kind of value where all of a sudden Derrick Henry retires and Rasheen Ali is in a 1A, 1B situation with who knows. And in the 15th round of your fantasy league, you got somebody who finished as an outside RB3 and is one of the best keeper candidates on the board. So I have nothing but incredible things to say about Rasheen Ali. He is somebody that's going to continue to be more expensive as the summer goes along. And we're going to look back, and especially in Dynasty in our rookie drafts, and say, I can't believe Rasheen Ali was, a late 4th, 5th round pick. It's absolutely ridiculous. Moving on to some injury news, we had an injury scare where Michael Pittman left Colts OTAs with a reported knee injury, but happy to report here that there is no reason to worry about Michael Pittman. Shane Steichen told reporters after practice that he bumped his knee and should be fine. So we're looking at a bone bruise at worst here for Michael Pittman. So excuse me. All good for Michael Pittman. Any fantasy managers or Colts fans can breathe their sigh of relief. He should be back at practice shortly. And so far, we have not seen really any brutal injuries here at OTAs. That's always a great sign. It is early, but when the intensity of these practices starts to ramp up is when we start seeing some injuries, particularly knee injuries. So when I saw that Pittman had a knee injury, I nearly had a heart attack, and just glad he made it out of there safe, and glad we haven't had any sort of big injuries so far through training camp. Moving on to the situation in the Carolina Panthers. So new head coach Dave Canales has been giving rave reviews about Bryce Young throughout the OTAs and throughout the offseason. So Canales said he's doing fantastic with the system, and quote, so for us, the formations are pretty vanilla, so we can just teach the concept we want out of each route, the depth, the footwork we want. He goes on to say, as I expect him to do, he's really mastered that part of it. So Bryce Young they're currently in the early stages of installing this Dave Canales offense. And so this is why Bryce Young is both a short and long-term bet right now. So in year one, installing a new system, you're not always at your best. It takes multiple years. Many executives have gone on the record saying this. It takes multiple years to get your system in place. But really good coaches are good at installing the basics of it to let your players succeed in year one and start understanding the basics. And then by week 8-ish of the first season, you start to layer in some new things as you go along, not over complexing things and adding too much in throughout the season, but layering in some to adjust for other looks you've seen and advance your offense a little bit so that you don't become too vanilla and too predictable throughout the regular season. So Dave Canales, who coached comeback player of the year Geno Smith and career resurgence Baker Mayfield, and just went to the playoffs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he now coaches Bryce Young. And one of the first things they did was go out and get a talented receiver for Bryce Young. And then they drafted, hopefully, their redo of Jonathan Mingo with Xavier Legette. And then they went out and drafted their RB1 to take some pressure off of Young. And they drafted Jonathan Brooks in the second round. So right now, especially with what we've seen with that Seattle Seahawks team a couple years ago and with last year's Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Carolina Panthers are becoming extreme values in fantasy football. Now, I don't think they are a Tampa where a receiver is top 10 and top 30 and I do think their running back can finish as an RB1 and then QB 17. I don't think it's going to be that drastic as the talent just isn't there. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, far superior to Xavier Legette / Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson. And there's no question about that. The defense in Tampa is much better than the defense in Carolina, but the current ADPs are Bryce Young at QB 27, Deontay Johnson at QB 4 or wide receiver 44, Legette at wide receiver 65, and even Thielen at wide receiver 75. And we're not going to forget that Thielen had multiple 7+ target games last year. He was still just a target hog in Carolina. And I understand that he's 31, 32 years old right now, but at wide receiver 75, particularly an underdog, if you're going to put up a Panthers stack, it's very cheap. And a guy like Thielen can still offer some boom weeks at a very, very, very cheap cost. So the ADPs aren't necessarily matching up with the upside. And for what it's worth, as I just pulled it up, Thielen was wide receiver 25 last year. Yeah, he's 34 years old. But we're seeing real time that wide receiver aging curves might be slowing down with Mike Evans, with Keenan Allen, with Adam Thielen. The transition to a zone heavier league has allowed for these receivers who are good at getting open, like Adam Thielen, to continue to succeed in the NFL because they don't have to take as many hits if they learn how to fall, i.e. Tyler Lockett. And when they're finding open spaces, they can just do their thing. Like if they're not taking hits, if they can hold up their speed a little bit, you can start playing until you're 34, like Adam Thielen. So even at wide receiver 75, like I think it's a little low. So the Carolina Panthers are extreme values right now in fantasy football. You're not prepared for what Dave Canales can do, the QB whisperer can do with Bryce Young. Bryce Young is very talented. He just had no help last year. We didn't see him make the Justin Fields type rookie mistakes where he didn't know when to step up in the pocket. He didn't know when to make a read. He didn't know when to throw to who. Bryce Young knows all that, and he did all that. He showed the arm talent. What happened to him was just a severe lack of surrounding talent, made it impossible for him to succeed. So we'll see over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, Bryce Young really live up to that number one pick potential that we thought he had and still does have inside of him. So Carolina Panthers, also Jonathan Brooks at RB24, draft him. He's going to have so much opportunity in Carolina in his rookie year, and he is going to win a lot of people leagues in the back half of the year when he's getting 25 touches a game. So be sure to draft Jonathan Brooks. Let's close out the show talking about holdouts. So T. Higgins currently holding out of OTAs. He is the only franchise tag who has not gotten a long-term extension. So Higgins has refused to sign his franchise tender thus far, and he is not eligible to be with the team at OTAs as they kick off this week. So it is official to start OTAs. T. Higgins is holding out. I do not expect this to last into the regular season. To my knowledge, Le'Veon Bell is still the only player that has fully held out throughout the entire season. So I'm going to continue to bet against that happening. The money is great, but I'm not going to lie. This wouldn't sit well with me either if I were T. Higgins, the only franchise tag to not get a long-term deal. It's pretty clear there that it seems clear that the relationship between Higgins and the Bengals is ruined. That Higgins is going to be wearing a new uniform in 2025 at the very latest. The question now is, will he finish 2024 with a Bengals jersey? That I can't answer. I tend to think he will, as the team is going to want a Super Bowl, and whatever probably day 3, if we're going to be on it, maybe day 2 pick, compilation of day 3 picks. They're not worth getting rid of T. Higgins midseason and punting your Super Bowl chances. So I think they let Higgins go down with the ship, and this year ends up being Higgins' last year in Cincinnati, but he very well could get traded. But I'm not worried about drafting T. Higgins. He's going to play this regular season. Barring injury, he'll play every single game. And if he gets traded, he's either getting traded to a contender that has a good offense, yay, or he gets traded to a mid-tier team where he'll be the number 1 target leader potentially. So Higgins has the profile where he'll be fine. Very few situations you can stick him in and he'll get completely eaten alive by the target competition. But this is likely Higgins' last year as a Cincinnati Bengal. We're growing towards that certainty every single day. And my opinion is he remains a Bengal all season until the end of the season, where he is allowed to walk or potentially, I believe, get franchise tagged again. That's off the top of my head, so I'm admitting I might be wrong there. But look for T. Higgins to come back at some point before the season's over, near the preseason, when preseason games start to kick off. Look for T. Higgins to return. And you can also look for Brandon Ayuk to return eventually. Brandon Ayuk is also holding out of OTAs. He is looking for a new contract, reportedly similar to the one that Amon-Ra St. Brown just signed, which I'm not completely there yet, but I understand. I understand wanting Amon-Ra's contract, and I think market-wise, that's what he's worth. So I think that's a fair asking price. And as long as the 49ers can figure out a way for it to work with the books, which, let's be honest, every GM is capable of doing that, I think Brandon Ayuk is the one that gets signed to the long-term deal here. Again, I'm not expecting Brandon Ayuk to miss regular season games with a holdout, but movement is going to have to happen in these extension talks before he returns to the team. And as we've seen before, these talks take time. We know they're talking behind the scenes. This isn't as simple as Brandon Ayuk just saying, pay me, and the 49ers saying no. It's more nuanced than that. There's a lot of work, a lot of talks with agents and things of that nature. So, but the situation is interesting because ever since the Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel trade rumors started, this has been one of the situations we need to monitor the closest, because 2 variables that are very important to the San Francisco 49ers offense. And two big reasons why they were in the Super Bowl last year were both reportedly on the trade market as they seek new deals. Ayuk still hasn't gotten a deal. Debo hasn't gotten a deal. No one's gotten traded, but Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing got drafted. And so it begs the question, what are they going to do? To me, I think it ends up being pretty vanilla, and Ayuk gets an extension. Debo does not, plays the year and leaves. But anything can happen. I mean, it would be crazy, and I think it's far-fetched, but it's still very realistic that one of Brandon Ayuk or Debo Samuel is traded before year's end. There are some within even 49ers ranks that think that Debo may be traded at some point this year. So it's still an incredibly interesting situation to monitor. I can't believe this hasn't become less big of a deal yet. I can't believe there hasn't been some movement in contract talks. I couldn't believe they outwardly said that they were listening to trade calls on those two players, and then after the draft went back and said that they weren't listening to trade calls. It's just a very weird situation coming out of San Francisco, and I'm going to be monitoring it closely throughout the offseason because any little movement can drastically impact our fantasy drafts. That's going to be the show today. Thank you for tuning in on this beautiful, hope it's beautiful where you're at, beautiful down here in Dallas, Texas. This beautiful Saturday on Memorial Day weekend. You smell that? You smell that? That's the NFL season approaching. We're almost there. We've gotten through the draft. We're in OTAs, and we are so close to starting our seasonal draft season and then going straight into 18 weeks plus playoffs of NFL football. I can't wait. I know you can't either. Tune in tomorrow for the Sunday edition of Player Profiler today. And as always, I'll see you next Saturday. Take care, everyone.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.